Today we are starting Git. Git, why do we need to learn Git is the question for DevOps. Git is a version control system. We also call it as source code management. Source code management. What do you mean by source code?
The code we are deploying server.
The code which you have written by using any language. It can be by using Java, .NET, whatever. You write some code. That code we call it as source code. Generally, who writes the code? Developers will be writing the code. That code we call it as source code. Now, when the developer is writing the code, if the developer is trying to store that particular code only in the developer system, generally also, let's say if I am a developer, I'll write the code and I'll keep it in my system. Am I correct? Now, if you are keeping it only in the developer system, then you'll have two problems. One problem is, if that system gets crashed, you'll be losing the code. Yes or no? That is one issue. The second issue is, at some point, you need to integrate the code, meaning you need to combine each developer code, meaning you need to have it as a one project code, right? Meaning, let's say if we are all developers, at some point you need to combine everyone's code, then only it becomes a project. Am I correct? Because you work on some functionality, I work on other functionality. You need to combine it, then it becomes a project, right? Manually combining the code takes time and you make mistakes. Yes or no? Each time when I need your code, I should not be asking like, give me your code, and vice versa also shouldn't happen. And you make some mistakes as well. Now we need to find a solution for this. Forget about version control system or source code management. Can you give me one solution for this? I'm not talking about Git. Apart from Git, what is the solution? The problem statement is, I do not wish to store the code only in my system, and manually, I should not be taking the code from other developer. Okay, so the solution could be, for the first one I'm giving now, keep the code in one common place. In any one server, you keep the code. What is the advantage you get it? If you are keeping the code in the server, not only in the developer system, if the developer system crashes, you can always take the code from the server. Yes or no? Now, but still, you don't need to, in the second case, see, you are actually disturbing the other developer to give me your code, Am I correct? Now, you don't need to disturb the other developer. As soon as one developer feels that he has completed the code, he or she, they can keep the code in the server. Am I correct? They can keep the code in the server, and other developer can take the code from the server. Doesn't need to disturb other developer. But still, there is a problem. What is that problem is? You are keeping the code manually only in the server also. You're not disturbing other developer, that is fine. But you are keeping the code. Let's say there are around 100 files. You modified 10 files and all. Each and every file change, you need to open in the server and you need to place it manually. It is not like copy and replace. If you copy and replace, what will happen? Other developers' code will be deleted or overridden by your changes. That shouldn't happen. So each and every file you need to open, and wherever you made the change, only that particular change you need to have it in the server. That takes some time, right? Let's say I modified 15th line. So 15th line, that both the files you need to open in the local and the server, and only the 15th line, wherever you made the change, that change only you need to place it in the server. That takes some time, and also you make some mistakes. It's not only in one file, right? N number of files. Then troubleshooting also becomes an issue. Where exactly went wrong? Even though if you are not trying to place even a small word also, the entire functionality will not work. You know that. Okay, you are not supposed to miss anything when you are writing a code. Now, we need to find a solution for this. I do not wish to keep the changes into the server manually. I need to have a solution for this. The solution is version control system. Solution is version control system. What advantage you get with this version control system? It's a tool. It's a tool. Version control system is a tool. There are n number of version control systems. Okay, I'll come to that, but most of the cases, all the developers would be using some editors. Editors. IDE, I call it as integrated development environment. For example, if you are a Java developer, they'll be using something like Eclipse. If you are a .NET developer, they'll be using something like Visual Studio. Any other developers, they might use, like if you are an Android developer under Android Studio, yes, then Visual Studio Code, Sublime editor, like that, n number of editors. For example, this is one of the editor. This is one of the editor. Let's say this is my code. This is my code. Now, I have 100 files. See, what I'll do is, to this particular editor, I'll integrate my version control system. What do you mean by integrate? I'll install my version control system in this particular editor. So that instead of placing the changes manually into the server, with the help of tool, you can do it. The tool do it for you. For example, let's say there are 100 files. You added 2 new files. You modified 10 existing files. 10 existing files. Even though when you are trying to manually push the code into the server, one file you missed it actually. You have not pushed it. There won't be any indication saying that this file you have not pushed it. Yes or no? If you are not using any tool, there won't be any indication. You will not be knowing. You forgot to push it. That's all. Then you need to identify later which one you missed it, all that. But if you are using the tool, the advantage would be, can you see here? M, U, something like this. See, I'm not saying this is how it would be, but there will be an indication like this. You modified that particular file, you updated that particular file, added whatever. Some indications will be there so that you will understand which file you pushed it, which file you have not pushed it. Are you getting the point? If you are not using a tool, that indications won't be there. Okay. And also, you are not trying to push this particular changes manually. With the help of tool, you are pushing it. If there are 100 files also doesn't matter. Only with one particular command, all the changes gets pushed at a time. Getting the point? Why do you need to use a tool? Very important to understand why. Before you try to understand how to do it, it is important to understand why. We are now trying to understand why do you need a version control system. This is one of the advantage. You are trying to place the changes into the server. How? With the help of tool. Getting the point? And you also get one more advantage, which is history. History. What do you mean by history is the question. For example, I have one file with 10 lines of code. With 10 lines of code. I pushed that particular file into the server today. Then what will happen? One version will be created for that particular file. So tomorrow, what do? I'll delete 2 lines in that particular file I'll add 4 more lines in that particular file and I'll push it. Day after tomorrow, when I need the old changes back, like whatever the changes I'm doing it today, I can get it back, since each time when you push it, it creates one new version. The old version changes, you can always get it back. Getting the point? But if you are not using a version control system, there is no way of getting the old changes. Once you delete, it's deleted. That's it, right? Is there any way to get it back? You have one file, you have deleted some change, some lines of code. Then later on, when you need it back, you can't take it back. But if you are using a version control system, since it is maintaining the history, you can always take the old changes back. That is an advantage of version control system. Getting the point? Now let's have a recap. What are all the changes? You are not trying to keep the changes in the local, you are trying to keep the changes in the server. So if the developer system crashes, you can always take the changes from the server. The second advantage is you are not trying to keep the changes manually into the server. You are using a tool to do it for you. So that if you miss something, there will be an indication saying that these files are not yet pushed to the server or not yet committed, whatever. Okay. So that is a second advantage. And the third advantage is it maintains the history so that it is always easy to get the old changes back. That's the third advantage. There is one more advantage, which is branching. I'll explain that branching later. If I explain it now, you will be in a confusion. That's the reason I'm not teaching that now. Is this clear? Why do we need to use a version control system? Any questions, anyone on this? Clear? Okay. Now, there are two types of version control systems. One is centralized version control system, and second one is distributed version control system. Centralized and distributed version control system. Give me one moment. Okay. Two types of version control system: centralized and distributed version control system. First, we will try to discuss the architecture of centralized version control system. Git is a distributed version control system. It is not centralized version control system. TFS, SVN, all that comes under centralized version control systems. Fine. Now, let us first discuss about the architecture of centralized version control system, meaning how exactly it works. And there are some limitations or disadvantages by using this kind of version control system. That is the reason we actually use distributed version control system. Git is a distributed version control system. So before I get into that, we'll try to understand this one first. Let's say there is a server and three developer systems. Initially, in the server, also in the developer systems, there won't be any code. Everything would be empty. Now, let's say developer 1 is trying to add one file in the developer system, developer 1 system. Let's say file 1 developer 1 is adding. Developer 2 is also adding one more file, which is file 2. This is developer 2 system. This is developer 1 system. Now, developer 1 tries to keep this particular file in the server so that other developers can avail it. Now, I am trying to use TFS as a version control system now. Now, TFS related commands, I am trying to use it here. Fine. To keep this particular file into the server, what developer 1 should do is, developer 1 should use a command called check-in. Check-in. When this check-in happens, this particular file will be placed into the server. And there will be one version will be created for that. Version 1.0. Getting the point? Now, each time developers use the check-in, one latest version will be created. For example, this particular file might be having, let's say, like 10 lines of code. With that 10 lines, you are creating one version. I'm modifying that particular file, adding one more new line into that. Then what will happen in the next version? 11 lines will be available. Okay, one more version, 1.0 will be created and you will get to see the like 11 lines in that particular file. Now, developer 2 is also trying to do the same. Same meaning, check-in. When that check-in happens, what will happen? File 2, 1.0. Now, developer 3 does not wish to create a new file. Developer 3 wish to work on existing file. Developer 3 wish to work on existing file. So, what exactly developer 3 should do? Existing meaning file 1 and file 2. So, these two are already there in the server. So, developer 3 wish to work on any one of the file. Meaning, you take those files, then work on it. You take the files from the server, then work on those files. Now, what exactly developer 3 should do is, developer 3 should do something called get latest. Get latest. That means all the files which exist in the server, developer 3 will get it. So, in this case, what will happen? You will get file 1 and file 2, but remember, only the latest versions they'll get it. Now, anyway, only one version will have it. So, developer 3 will get only the latest version. Fine. So, that has happened. Now, but developer 3 now wish to modify any one of the file. Let's say developer 3 wish to modify file 2. Directly they cannot modify. What developer 3 should do is, developer 3 should use a command called checkout. Checkout. So, very important here, try to understand checkout. When you do the checkout, what exactly it does is, it does two things. Get latest plus lock. Get latest meaning what? Latest version of that particular file, this guy will get it. Then lock. Lock is optional, but most of the cases we do it. Lock meaning, now this particular file will be locked with developer 3 in the server. Locked with developer 3 in the server. So what does it mean? Now, if the developer 2 or developer 1, any other developers apart from developer 3 tries to check out, either developer 1 or developer 2 tries to check out, now the version control system does not allow them to check out. What exactly it says? Developer 3 already checked out the file. Until developer 3 checks in the file, you cannot check out a file. Are you getting the point? Until developer 3 checks in the file, you cannot check out. So what does it mean? At one point of time, only one person can work on same file. Simultaneously, multiple developers cannot work on a same file. Yes or no? Okay, fine. Now, once the developer 3 finishes modifying that particular file, now what exactly developer 3 can do? Check in. Once the check-in happens, this lock will be removed and file 2 1.1 will be created. Now, when the developer 1 or developer 2 tries to check out, what will happen? The new version, they'll get it. On top of that version, they will be modifying. Again, they will be checking. Then one more version will be created. Yes or no? This is how centralized version control system works. Okay, looks like you are not getting that much clearly. What is the issue? Tell me. I'm okay to teach like from the beginning also, but you just tell me where are you lacking, like from till where you understand, like
Very simple, sir. We don't have
Uh.
checking. I can also can check.
Hmm.
But third one, check out which is logging the code.
Hmm.
The person from the is logging, taking checking again.
Hmm.
One and two, they can modify.
That's it. No, you understood, no? But I see blank face. That's the reason. Okay. Okay. So that's what it is. Okay. Fine. Now we need to understand the limitations or disadvantages by using this kind of version control system. I'm giving a clue. I'm saying server, right? This server generally will not be there in the same region or a location wherever you are working. That means if you are working from India, the server might be there somewhere in US or UK or Australia or somewhere else. Fine. Now, let's try to understand the limitations in this kind of version control system. Okay. Can you tell me? Now you understood the architecture. Now you only tell me the limitations in this. Exactly. So that we call it as latency. If you are working from India, since the server exists somewhere in US or UK and all, each time when you tries to check out and check in, it takes some time. Yes or no? It depends on your network. Nowadays, at least the networks are faster. Earlier, it used to be like for one file, if you tries to check out, like I'm talking about like 10 years back or 7, 8 years back and all, there was no broadband and all. So at that time, it used to take very long time, like 5 minutes for one file. For one file only, if it is taking 5 minutes, how about 100 files? Yes or no? So this we call it as latency. Then any other issues? Any other issues?
Working on that. Feel long, right?
Yeah.
Some of the changes want by the developers, what they want, like development.
Yeah. So partially correct. You are locking the file. Now, if any other developer tries to check out, they cannot do it. So that's what I mentioned. Simultaneously, multiple developers cannot work on a single file. That is the issue. If you are See, even though lock is optional, if you're not locking it, the problem would be you will have to have a proper coordination between the developers. Otherwise, there is a chance of overriding the code. Okay, so dependency I mentioned. Dependency on what? Another developer, right? Unless they check in, you can't check out. Let's say one person checked out and the entire day they are not checking in the file, then other developer cannot work on that file. Yes or no? There is a problem. Yeah. Then anything else? Huh? That won't be a problem. See, we are talking about server, right? Server is a no cost is and all is fine. But when you talk about a server is also a system. If that goes down, yes or no? This is a single point of contact, we call it as. Entire code you are keeping it in one server. If that server goes down, then it becomes an issue. Server crashes. Then there is no way to take the code back. Some people usually say the code is already there in the developer system, you can take the code from there. But you are losing the history. You are losing the history. Yes or no? The latest code you might be having it. What about the old changes? Fine. Then, if the internet is not there, you can't check out and check it. Yes or no? That is also an issue. Okay? Internet. So these are all the, I would say, internet or network or something. So these are all the limitations or disadvantages by using CVS, Centralized Version Control System. Fine. Now, we need to find a solution for this. The solution is what? Distributed version control system. Let's try to understand that. As I mentioned, Git is a distributed version control system. So I'm not calling this as a server. I am calling this as a repository. The reason why I'm calling it as repository is it is not a single point of contact. You can have one more repository in between from the developer system to that repository to this repository. You can actually push the code. So that's the reason we are calling this as repository, not a server. So you can think of a placeholder for your code is repository. Fine. Now what exactly I'm trying to do? Same thing, like 3 developers, developer 1, developer 2, developer 3. Fine. As usual, developer 1 is trying to initially, even in the repository in the developer systems, you will not be having any changes. Now developer 1 is trying to add one file with 10 lines of code. There is a relevance of lines of code also here. That's why I'm adding the lines of code also here. In the CVS, I did not mention any lines of code. file to 20 lines of code in the developer 2 system. Fine. Now, developer 1 wish to place this particular file in the repository. It is not that much straightforward. They cannot use only one command to push this particular changes to the repository. Very important to understand, listen properly. So what exactly developer 1 should do is, they should use something called commit. But that commit will happen in the local repository. Where is the local repository? In this architecture, what exactly happens is, this entire copy of this repository, you will have it in the local as well. You'll have it in the local as well. This we call it as local repository. So each and every developer system will have a local repository. Okay, this we call it as central repository. Okay. Fine. Now, directly developer 1 cannot push this particular file into the central repository. What exactly developer 1 should do is, developer 1 should commit that particular file in the local repository. Commit is a command. When you commit, what exactly happens is, one commit ID will be created in the local. One commit ID will be created in the local. Commit ID will be having like, it is a like 40 characters length unique string. 40 character length unique string. It will be something like this. Like 40 characters. Are you getting my point? Instead of using like this, I'm using C1, C2, C3. But generally, commit ID will be, the ID will be this much. Unique string. So one commit will be created and that will hold that file change now. In this case, file 1, 10 lines of code. Now where exactly this commit is happening? In the local system. And committing to local repository. It's not there in the central repository. It's still there in the local system. Very important to understand the architecture. That's why I'm saying. Fine. Now, developer 2 is also doing it. Or else I'll come to the developer 2. Let's finish up developer 1 only. Now, what exactly developer 1 is doing is, developer 1 is trying to add 5 more lines in the same file and creating one more file called file 3 with 12 lines of code. With 12 lines of code. It is not mandatory that each time developer commits, they should be pushing that particular commit into the center. They can keep on working in the local, they can keep committing it. At one point, they can push all the changes to the central repository. In the local only, you keep committing all the changes. In the end, you can actually push to the central repository. Now, developer 1 modified an existing file with 5 more lines, added 5 more lines, and added a new file, file 3 with 12 lines. Now developer 3 is trying to commit again. Now, 2 important points here. Commit does not hold only one file change. Commit can hold multiple file changes. Commit can hold multiple file changes. It's not only one file change. Okay. The second one would be Commit can hold the difference between the previous commit and the current commit. Are you getting my point? This is important. The difference between previous commit and the current commit. Now tell me the difference between the previous commit and the current commit. Now we are going to create new commit. Now what is the difference now? Extra lines in the file 1. So now that is one difference. File 1 5 lines of code and file 3 12 lines of code. This is the difference. Now the new commit will hold that change. It's not only one file change, both file changes. Both file changes. So commit to C2, I'm saying file 1 5 lines of code plus file 3 12 lines of code. That's the difference. Now again, I'm repeating, commit does not hold only one file change. It can hold multiple file changes. It can be an addition, updation, insert, like deletion, anything doesn't matter. It can hold all three. Okay, and multiple file changes. And it can hold even one file change also. Yeah, multiple or one. Based on the requirement, based on the need. Okay, fine. Now, developer 2 is also doing the same. Developer 2 is also committing it. So one more commit ID will be created, but that will be on the developer 2 system, not in the developer 1. Now, C1 and C2 developer 2 will not be seeing it. And C3 developer 1 will not be seeing it because that's there in their local system. Let's say you and me are developers. I'm doing it in my system. How can you see my change? Because it's not yet pushed to the center. So that's the reason. Now C3 file 2 20 lines of code. Yes or no? Now you know the relevance. So why we need to like use the number of lines also here. Okay. Now developer 1 wish to push these changes to the central repository. Now what exactly happens is developer 1 is actually pushing to the central repository. So at that time, we'll use a command called push. So what exactly happens? The C1 and C2 will be placed in the server, meaning in the central repository. Then the related file changes automatically anyway will be available in the central repository, file 1 and file 3. Now, developer 2 also wish to push this particular commit into the central repository. Now, there is one rule here. Very important to understand that rule. When developer 2 wish to push this particular change to the central, it does not allow developer 2 to push it. Git does not allow developer 2 to push it. The reason is there is a rule. That rule says whenever any push is happening, Git verifies the commits which exist in the central repository are there in the local or not. The commits which are available in the central repository are available in the local repository or not. Meaning in this case, C1 and C2 are there in the central but not in the local. C1 and C2, you are not seeing it in the dev2 local. Am I correct? You are seeing only C3, not C1 and C2. If that is the case, Git does not allow the developer to push the changes. What developer 2 should do is, developer 2 should pull first, then push it. Pull meaning take it. From the central to local, you are pulling. Getting a point? Okay, because C1 and C2 does not exist in the local of developer 2. Now developer 2 should pull first. When that pull happens, developer 2 will get what? C1 and C2. Now developer 2 can push it. When that push happens, if developer 1 needs to, then developer 1 also should pull it. If initially developer 1 did not do the pull. The reason is in the central it was empty. That's the reason. But in case of developer 2, in the central it was not empty. You had 2 commits. That's the reason you should pull then push it. Yes or no? Now, the next one is developer 3 case. Developer 3, hope no confusion till now. All clear? Any questions? Hope you are following. Yeah. Now, developer 3 wish to work on existing commits. Developer 3 does not want to work on new file, wish to work on existing commits. I'm saying existing commits, I'm not saying existing files. Remember this. Okay, because commit can hold one or multiple file changes. So when you pull one commit, you might get multiple file changes. It's not only one file change. Okay, fine. Now, what developer 3 should do is, developer 3 should use a command called clone. Clone. What is that? Clone. What do you mean by clone? Clone does 3 things. Very important again. Clone does 3 things. Initialization, connection, plus pull. Initialization, connection, plus pull. Initialization meaning Git is a tool. Each time when you are trying to commit, it should record the commit IDs, and each commit ID contains what are the file changes it should record. All that you should be doing, it should be doing it. Where exactly it does? In the local system. How exactly it should maintain all this? That's the reason when you do the initialization, what will happen is one folder called .git will be created in your project folder. .git folder will be created. The .git folder will contain some files. Using that files, Git maintains the local architecture. I'll explain the local architecture again. Okay, because it's not only commit, there are few other commands you should be using it. So that's the reason. So, but to maintain the local architecture and to store all the metadata, you need that .git folder. So when you use the clone, that .git folder will be created. You can do it separately also. I'll come to that. When do you do it separately? I'll explain that. But connection, there can be multiple central repositories, right? It's not only like only your central repository will be there. When you try to pull and push, how come it is trying to pull from the same central repository? The reason is when you do the clone, what will happen is one entry of your central repository gets added in your local repository. The URL of your central repository gets added in the local. That's why in each time when you try to push, it pushes to that repository, pulls from that repository. That entry gets added in the local. Then pull, I don't need to explain. What is pull? The changes from the central, you'll get into the local. That is pull. Yes or no? Now that is what happens when you do the clone. When you do the clone now, one .git folder will be created and connection, that URL gets added in the local and you get C1 C2, C3, and the related file changes as well. Related file changes, you will get it. Yes or no? Fine. Now the question is, why only developer 3 is cloning? Why not developer 1 and developer 2? Okay. Your point is correct, but even for developer 1 and developer 2, you need the git folder, yes or no? And you need to have a connection also. Only pull they'll not be doing, they don't need it. But other two, even developer 1 and developer 2 should be having it. So that's the reason even they should clone it. Initially, I did not explain that. The reason is, if I explain initially, then you will be in a confusion. That's the reason. But everyone should clone it. This is one-time job. Clone is one-time job. You should not be doing multiple times. When you need other developer changes, you need to pull it. Yes or no? Clone, you should do it only once. After that, you should be keep pulling and pushing. Okay, fine. Now developer 3 can modify any of the existing files. They can commit, they can push it. There is no locking mechanism now. Everything is happening in the local. Then whenever you wish to push, you push it. The only problem comes when both the developers are working on the same file and same lines. This is important. Both the developers are working on a same file, same line. Then you get a merge conflict. For example, there is one file. Let's say file 1, it contains 10 lines. I am modifying 10th line. I am modifying, let's say, 9th line. You are also modifying the 9th line. Before I push, you pushed it. With that line modified, like let's say one line you modified, right? You pushed it. Now when I try to push, what will happen? There is a new commit. The Git does not allow me to push it. Now I need to do what? Pull. When I do the pull, your change, I'll get it. I also modified 9th line. You also modified the 9th line. Now there will be a conflict. There will be a conflict because which line it should take it. Tool will not be knowing, right? Because both lines modified. I mean, like both developers modified the same line only on the same file. Now you get a merge conflict. So when you get a merge conflict, it displays something like this. The symbols will be like this, and code 1, code 2. Code 1 meaning developer 1 code, code 2 is developer 2 code. Now developer 2, whoever is actually trying to push next, they should decide whether they should keep developer 1 code or developer 2 code or both the lines. They are developers, they know which one to keep, which one to delete. And then you need to remove those symbols. Again, you need to commit it. Then again, you push it. But if the same line, different lines are modified, there won't be any issue. Why? Different lines, right? Automatically merge will happen. But only problem comes when same file, same lines are modified. Only at that time you get a merge conflict. Otherwise, you don't get any merge conflict. Now, any questions on this kind of version control system? I'll be sharing the video. You can again go through the video and come back with the questions. Okay, fine. Now let us try to understand these issues are rectified in this version control system or not. See, there are some limitations in the centralized version control system. That's why we are using distributed version control system. Now we need to know whether all those are rectified here or not. What about latency? Are you trying to check out and check in each time? No, right? You are having the changes in the local. Latency comes only when you are trying to push and pull, not for each file change. Yes or no? You are keep working on the local. Only one time you are trying to push and pull it. Unlike centralized version control system, for each file you are not trying to check out. You don't need that. Yes or no? Simultaneously, dependency I'm talking about. Simultaneously, multiple developers can work on a same file. Yes or no? You can work on local, not an issue. You don't need to check out or something. You can keep working on the local, but only problem comes when same file, same lines are modified. Otherwise, we don't see any issue. Then, if the central repository goes down, are you losing the code? No. In the local, we have it with the history. This is important. With the history. Okay, then if the internet is not working, you can still have the code in the local you are working on. Only when you push and pull, you need internet. Yes or no? So that is how you could resolve the issues by using distributed version control system. Git is a distributed version control system. Is this clear? Any questions?
100% means it was storing in a local system.
Yeah.
File is for
Yes. In the local only. Okay. So you'll get to know tomorrow in detail again. Like in the local, there is you need to understand like not only this much, you need to understand little more extra things. So you'll get to know tomorrow in detail about local. Okay. Okay. That is about today's session. So tomorrow, as I mentioned, we'll be learning in the local. It's not only commit. We do much more things. So all that architecture we'll understand tomorrow. Okay. So then before you try to join tomorrow's session, what I want you to do is, I want to do two things. One is, you should go to git-scm.com, git-scm.com, and you should download Git from here. How? Go to downloads, click on Windows, 64-bit Windows setup. Click on this. Now Git downloads here. Go to the downloads folder and you will get to see this. Right click, run as administrator. Right click. 1 second. Right click, run as administrator, and you say next, it gets installed. This is Git. This is a software which must be installed in the developer system. Okay, then to create a central repository, you should actually go to Bitbucket, bitbucket.org, bitbucket.org. Go there and register here. Register here. See, don't try to use like continue as Gmail or something. You use a Gmail ID, but don't continue say a Gmail ID. You need to create username and password and everything. Okay, and keep it ready. Just register in this one. You know how to register in any websites, right? Just register and keep it ready. Then I'll explain why do you need this later. Okay, so only these two you should be doing it. Apart from that, everything else is theory. But from the beginning, it is better to try to have a notes, whatever you understood. Keep maintaining that. Okay. And come back with the questions if you have any tomorrow. Clear? Fine. So, and newcomers, like all of you, I want your email IDs. So tomorrow, what I'll do is I'll be creating a Slack channel, and in that particular Slack channel, I'll be sharing the recordings. Today I'll share it in WhatsApp, but I'm not talking about existing batch, new batch I'm talking about. So you send your email ID. Today anyway, I send it in the WhatsApp, the recording video, but tomorrow onwards, you will get it in the Slack channel. Is this clear? Okay. Any questions, anyone, before I end the session? Okay then, thank you. Tomorrow we'll resume the session. Yeah, I'm just ending the session. Other 8 a.m. batch, you just join back. Okay, thank you.